Some secrets are worth dying for, others are worth killing for. I learned the difference the hard way when I discovered my own family had been slowly poisoning my reality for years, turning my deepest dreams into weapons against me. I still remember the exact moment my world shifted on its axis. It wasn't the moment I found out I was pregnant after 3 years of trying. It wasn't even the moment I lost the baby. It was the moment I realized my husband had planned it all. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning, from when I still believed love could conquer anything, and family meant safety. My name is Nadia, and this is the story of how I learned that sometimes the people who promise to protect you are the ones you need protection from most. It was a Tuesday morning in late September when I first held that pregnancy test in my trembling hands. I sat in the master bathroom of our suburban home in Westchester, New York, staring at those two pink lines that had taken 3 years to appear. 3 years of fertility treatments, 2 failed IVF attempts, and countless tears had led to this moment. The silence in that bathroom was deafening, not because I wasn't happy, but because the joy felt too fragile to voice aloud. Outside our bedroom window, the maple trees were just beginning to turn, their leaves catching the early morning light. I had always loved this time of year, the promise of change it brought. I had no idea how prophetic that feeling would prove to be. My husband Ryan was already downstairs, probably checking his phone over coffee like he did every morning before heading to his law firm in Manhattan. We had been married for 5 years, together for 8, and somewhere along the way, the easy intimacy we once shared had been replaced by polite distance. He blamed it on work stress, the pressure of making partner. I blamed it on the fertility struggles that had turned our bedroom into a clinical space of scheduled attempts and medical interventions. I decided to wait. I wanted to surprise him properly, maybe plan something special. After all the disappointment we had endured, this news deserved a moment of pure joy. What I didn't know was that Ryan had been planning his own surprise for months. That evening, his sister Chloe came over for dinner. She lived in the city, working as a social media influencer with a modest but devoted following. At 28, she was 3 years younger than me, and had always made me feel like I was trying too hard. She had this way of making comments that sounded supportive on the surface but left me questioning myself. "You look different tonight, Nadia," she said, settling into our dining room chair with her usual confidence. Glowing almost. "Have you been trying some new skincare routine?" I felt my cheeks warm. Could she really tell already, or was I just being paranoid? "Just been sleeping better lately," I lied, taking a sip of water instead of the wine Ryan had poured for everyone. Chloe's eyes sharpened with interest. "Not drinking tonight? That's unlike you. Usually you're the first to dive into a good Pinot Noir." The way she said it made it sound like I had a drinking problem, which I definitely didn't. But that was Chloe's specialty, making innocent observations that somehow made you feel defensive. "I'm just not in the mood," I said, forcing a smile. Ryan was watching this exchange with what looked like mild amusement, but something in his expression made me uncomfortable. There was a calculating quality to his attention that I hadn't noticed before, or maybe I had been choosing not to notice. After dinner, Chloe pulled out a small wrapped package. "I brought you something," she said, her smile bright. "It's this amazing herbal tea blend. Supposed to be great for women's health, balancing hormones and all that." I accepted the gift graciously, though something about her emphasis on women's health felt pointed. When I read the label later, I noticed several ingredients that were specifically contraindicated during pregnancy. At the time, I assumed it was just coincidence. The next few days passed in a haze of secret excitement. I made an appointment with my gynecologist for the following week, wanting official confirmation before I told Ryan. I found myself unconsciously placing my hand on my still flat stomach, imagining the future that was finally within reach. Ryan, meanwhile, seemed more attentive than he had been in months. He brought me coffee in the morning, asked about my day with genuine interest, and even suggested we take a weekend trip to his family's cabin in the Adirondacks. It would be good for us to get away, he said, his hand on my shoulder as I worked at my computer. I was a freelance graphic designer, which meant I could work from anywhere. Just some quiet time together. Maybe we could finally talk about our future properly. The irony of that statement would haunt me later. I agreed eagerly, interpreting his sudden romantic interest as a sign that our marriage was healing. I even allowed myself to imagine telling him about the pregnancy there, in the peaceful setting where we had gotten engaged 4 years earlier. The cabin sat on the shore of a pristine lake, surrounded by dense forest that was ablaze with autumn colors. It was the kind of place that appeared on postcards and vacation rental websites, all rustic charm and natural beauty. Ryan's family had owned it for generations, and it held the kind of memories that wealthy families use to bind themselves together. Chloe had decided to join us at the last minute, which shouldn't have surprised me. She had a way of inserting herself into our plans, and Ryan never seemed to mind. In fact, he often seemed more relaxed when she was around, more like the man I had fallen in love with in college. On our second evening there, the 3 of us were sitting around the dinner table when disaster struck. I had been feeling nauseated all day, which I attributed to morning sickness, though I was careful not to let it show. We were talking about Ryan's work when Chloe accidentally knocked over her water glass, sending liquid cascading across the table toward my purse. In my rush to save my bag, I knocked it over instead, sending the contents spilling across the hardwood floor. Among my usual items, my phone, wallet, and keys. A small bottle rolled across the room, coming to rest against the stone fireplace. Prenatal vitamins. The silence that followed was absolute. Chloe's eyes went wide with surprise, but there was something else there too, something that looked almost like satisfaction. Ryan stared at the bottle for a long moment, his face unreadable. "Nadia," he said finally, his voice gentle but somehow wrong. "Are those what I think they are?" I felt my face flush hot with embarrassment and anger. This wasn't how I had wanted him to find out. "I was going to tell you," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I wanted it to be special. But instead of the joy I had hoped for, Ryan's expression filled with what looked like pity. "Oh, sweetheart," he said, rising from his chair to come to me. "Are you sure you should be taking those? Dr. Martinez told us we needed to be careful about false hope." The words hit me like a physical blow. False hope. As if my pregnancy was some kind of delusion I had created for myself. "I took a test," I said, my voice growing stronger with indignation. "Multiple tests. They were all positive." "Honey," Chloe said softly, and there was something almost cruel in her gentleness. "Sometimes our bodies play tricks on us when we want something so badly. Maybe you should wait to see the doctor before getting too excited." But I had seen those pink lines. I knew what they meant. The fact that these two people, the ones who should have been celebrating with me, were instead treating me like a child who needed to be protected from her own imagination, made something snap inside me. "I'm not imagining this," I said, standing up so quickly my chair scraped against the floor. "I'm pregnant, and instead of being happy, you're making me feel crazy." "We're not trying to make you feel crazy," Ryan said, but his tone was the same one people use with confused elderly relatives or small children having tantrums. "We're just trying to help you manage your expectations." The condescension in his voice was the final straw. I turned and ran toward the stairs, wanting nothing more than to escape their pitying looks and concerned whispers. I could hear Ryan following me, his footsteps heavy on the wooden steps. "Nadia, wait," he called. "Let's talk about this calmly." I whirled around at the top of the stairs, my hands shaking with rage and hurt. "Calmly? You just told me I'm delusional in front of your sister. You made me feel like I'm losing my mind when I should be celebrating." "I'm trying to protect you," he said, reaching for my arm. "From disappointment, from getting hurt again." "By hurting me now?" I yanked my arm away from his grasp. "By making me feel like I can't trust my own body?" What happened next still plays in my mind in slow motion. Ryan reached for me again, his grip tighter this time, almost painful. I pulled back instinctively, my body moving faster than my brain could process. For just a moment we were locked in this strange dance, him holding on and me pulling away. Then, suddenly, he let go. Not gradually, not gently, but all at once, as if my arm had suddenly become too hot to touch. I was already off balance, already moving backward, and when his support disappeared, there was nothing to stop my momentum. I fell backward down those steep wooden stairs, my body hitting each step with sickening thuds. The pain was immediate and overwhelming, radiating from my back and abdomen in waves that made the world gray around the edges. When I finally came to rest at the bottom, crumpled against the stone hearth, the house was silent except for the sound of my own ragged breathing. I looked up through the haze of pain and saw two figures at the top of the stairs. Ryan looked stricken, his face pale with what might have been shock or fear. But it was Chloe's expression that would haunt me forever. She wasn't shocked. She wasn't horrified. There was something almost satisfied in her face, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth that she didn't bother to hide. The next few hours were a blur of ambulances and emergency rooms, of doctors with serious faces and hushed consultations. Ryan held my hand and played the part of the devastated husband perfectly, but I kept thinking about that smile on Chloe's face. The doctor who delivered the news was kind but direct. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Patterson. The fall caused what we call a placental abruption. We've lost the pregnancy." The words confirmed what I already knew, what I had felt the moment I hit those stairs. But hearing it out loud made it real in a way that left me feeling hollow and broken. Ryan squeezed my hand and made all the right sounds of grief and comfort, but there was something theatrical about his performance that made my skin crawl. When he stepped out to call his office and let them know he wouldn't be in the next day, I used the opportunity to check something that had been nagging at me. Ryan and I had shared passwords for everything for years. It was one of those couple things that we had done early in our relationship as a gesture of trust and transparency. I had never used his before, never felt the need to, but something about the timing of this whole weekend was bothering me. I pulled out my phone and logged into his email account, my hands shaking as I scrolled through his recent messages. What I found there changed everything. There was an email to his lawyer dated a week before our trip, asking about divorce procedures and specifically inquiring about the implications of a spouse's mental health issues in custody and financial settlements. Another email to an insurance agent, increasing the life insurance policy he had taken out on me just 6 months earlier, making himself the sole beneficiary. But it was his search history that really told the story. How to prove mental instability in divorce proceedings, symptoms of pseudocyses false pregnancy, legal definition of psychological manipulation. How long do pregnancy hormones stay in system after miscarriage? My hands were shaking so hard I could barely hold the phone. This wasn't a tragic accident. This wasn't even a crime of passion. This was a plan. Ryan returned just as I was closing his email, his face arranged in appropriate lines of concern and grief. How are you feeling, sweetheart? Do you need anything? I looked at him. This man I had loved and trusted and built a life with, and felt something cold and hard settle in my chest where my heart used to be. I'm fine, I said, and for the first time in years, I meant it. The next few weeks passed in a strange haze. I played the part of the grieving, devastated wife while inside I was anything but devastated. I was planning. Ryan and Chloe thought they had won. Ryan treated me with exaggerated gentleness, as if I might break at any moment. He encouraged me to see a therapist, to take time off work, to lean on him for support. He was setting up the narrative of the unstable wife who couldn't handle reality. Chloe visited frequently, always bearing gifts and sympathy. She would sit with me for hours, documenting my struggles on her social media as an example of supporting family through difficult times. Her follower count grew as she shared carefully curated glimpses of my supposed breakdown. But I wasn't breaking down. I was building up. I was collecting evidence. The first thing I did was contact Marcus Chen, an old friend from college who now worked in cybersecurity. Marcus and I had dated briefly sophomore year, before we realized we were better as friends. He had always been brilliant with computers, and more importantly, he owed me a favor. Years earlier, when Marcus was struggling with addiction and close to being expelled, I had lent him money and helped him find a good treatment program. I had never asked for anything in return, but now I needed his expertise. I need to recover some deleted files from a home security system. I told him when we met at a coffee shop in the city, and I need to do it without leaving any trace that I was looking. Marcus studied my face carefully. He was one of the few people who had known me well enough in college to see through facades. This is about Ryan, isn't it? I nodded. I need to know what really happened that night. He didn't ask for details, which I appreciated. Give me a few days, he said. And Nadia, be careful. While Marcus worked on the technical side, I began my own investigation. I started paying attention to things I had previously ignored. The way Ryan's law practice had been struggling financially for the past year, despite his claims of success. The way he and Chloe would stop talking when I entered a room. The way certain conversations seemed rehearsed. I also started documenting everything. Every conversation, every visit from Chloe, every instance of Ryan's performative concern. I created a detailed timeline of events leading up to the weekend at the cabin, noting things that hadn't seemed significant at the time but now took on new meaning. When Marcus called me back a week later, his voice was grim. I found something, he said. You're not gonna like it. We met again at the same coffee shop, and he handed me a flash drive. There's audio on there from your home security system, conversations from after you went to the hospital. I waited until I was home alone to listen to the recording. Ryan and Chloe's voices came through clearly, discussing what had happened with the casual tone of people reviewing a successful business meeting. Do you think it worked? Chloe's voice asked. Perfectly, Ryan replied. The pregnancy was actually a gift. Now we have a clear path forward. No one will question a man divorcing a wife who's clearly mentally unstable, especially after she lost a baby. The life insurance policy will cover any settlement, and if something happens to her before the divorce is final, even better. And my part in all this? You've been documenting her decline beautifully. Your social media posts will be excellent evidence of her deteriorating mental state. Plus, having a witness to her accident makes everything more believable. I listened to the entire conversation twice, my hands steady as I took notes. They had planned everything. The weekend at the cabin, Chloe's presence as a witness, even the way Ryan had let go of my arm at just the right moment to ensure I would fall. The pregnancy they talked about dismissively had been real. The baby I had lost had been real, and they had killed both my child and my trust with the same calculated shove, but instead of destroying me, their betrayal had freed me. For the first time in years, I knew exactly who I was dealing with, and I knew exactly what I needed to do. The next phase of my plan required patience and performance skills I didn't know I possessed. I had to convince Ryan and Chloe that their manipulation was working while secretly preparing my counterattack. I started seeing the therapist Ryan had recommended, a colleague of his from law school who I suspected was feeding him information about our sessions. I played the part perfectly, breaking down at strategic moments, expressing confusion about what was real and what wasn't, even questioning my own memories of the pregnancy. Sometimes I wonder if I imagined the whole thing. I told Dr. Reeves during one session, letting my voice crack with practiced vulnerability. Ryan says I've been under so much stress lately, maybe my mind just created what I wanted to see. Meanwhile, I was using my graphic design skills to create something else entirely. A presentation that would tell the real story, complete with timeline, evidence, and audio recordings. I worked on it late at night when Ryan was asleep, saving everything to encrypted drives that I kept hidden in my home office. I also began reaching out to people in Ryan's professional circle, not to share my suspicions, but to learn more about his business situation. What I discovered was worse than I had imagined. His law practice was not just struggling, it was failing. He had been borrowing money from clients' trust accounts, a form of embezzlement that would destroy his career if discovered. The insurance policy on my life wasn't just about divorce settlements. It was about covering his debts and starting over somewhere new with Chloe, who had apparently been more than just his sister-in-law for several months. 3 months after the cabin incident, Ryan announced that his firm was hosting a major fundraising gala for a children's charity. It would be held at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, a glittering affair that would attract the most important people in New York's legal and social circles. It's really important for my career, he told me, playing the supportive husband card. I know you're still struggling, but it would mean a lot to me if you came. You don't have to stay long. I agreed readily, which seemed to surprise him. I think it might be good for me, I said, to get out, see people, maybe start feeling normal again. What Ryan didn't know was that this gala would be the perfect stage for my own performance. I spent weeks preparing. I hired a personal stylist and bought a dress that would make heads turn, a stunning red gown that transformed me from grieving victim into something more powerful. I practiced my speech until every word was perfect, every pause calculated for maximum impact. I also made sure that certain people would be in attendance. I reached out to investigative journalists, women's rights advocates, and even a few social media influencers with large followings. I framed my invitations as networking opportunities, never revealing my true purpose. The night of the gala, I arrived separately from Ryan, claiming I had a last-minute client meeting to finish. When I walked into the museum's Great Hall, conversation stopped. The woman who had been hiding in oversized sweaters in grief for months was gone, replaced by someone who commanded attention. Ryan was on stage, delivering his speech about family values and the importance of supporting vulnerable children. The irony was not lost on me as I made my way through the crowd, greeting people with renewed confidence. The family is the foundation of everything we build in society, Ryan was saying, his voice carrying across the room with practiced authority. It's where we learn trust, love, and the values that guide us through life's challenges. I waited until he reached the crescendo of his speech, the moment when he would ask for donations and support. Then I moved. Excuse me, I said, approaching the stage with confident steps. I'd like to add something to my husband's beautiful words about family. Ryan's face went white as I climbed the steps to join him at the podium. In the audience, I could see Chloe near the back, her phone out to live stream as she always did at events like this. Perfect. Family is indeed the foundation, I said, my voice carrying clearly through the microphone. But sometimes, that foundation is built on lies. I gestured to the museum staff member I had arranged to have waiting in the wings. The large screen behind us, which had been displaying the charity's logo, suddenly changed to show the first slide of my presentation. 3 months ago, I suffered a miscarriage after falling down the stairs at my husband's family cabin. I continued, my voice steady despite the gasps from the audience. What I discovered later was that the fall wasn't an accident. The slides changed to show Ryan's email to his lawyer, his insurance policy increases, his search history. Each piece of evidence appeared in clear, undeniable detail while I narrated the story of their betrayal. My husband and his sister planned to eliminate both me and the child I was carrying, I said, my eyes never leaving Ryan's horrified face. They documented my supposed mental breakdown on social media, consulted with lawyers about having me declared incompetent, and orchestrated what they thought would look like a tragic accident. The final slide showed a transcript of the recorded conversation between Ryan and Chloe, their words displayed in stark black and white for everyone to read. Then I played the audio. Ryan and Chloe's voices filled the silent room, their casual discussion of murder and fraud echoing off the museum's marble walls. The pregnancy was actually a gift, Ryan's recorded voice said. If something happens to her before the divorce is final, even better. The silence that followed was absolute. Then, chaos. Security guards were moving toward the stage, but they were blocked by the crowd's reaction. Some people were shouting, others were pulling out phones to record. Several women in the audience were crying. Ryan tried to grab the microphone from me, but I stepped away smoothly. There's one more thing, I said, my voice cutting through the noise. The fraud doesn't stop with attempted murder. Ryan has been embezzling from his clients' trust accounts for over a year. At this, several people in the audience stood up with renewed interest. I had made sure that some of Ryan's clients were on the guest list. As if on cue, my lawyer appeared at the side of the stage with 2 police officers. Ryan Patterson, he announced in a voice that carried across the now silent room. "You're being served with divorce papers and a restraining order. You're also under investigation for fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy to commit murder." Ryan's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. For the first time since I had known him, he was speechless. I turned to Chloe, who was still holding her phone but had forgotten she was live streaming. Her face was pale with shock and what looked like genuine fear. "Thank you for documenting everything so thoroughly," I said, loud enough for the microphone to catch. "Your social media posts will be excellent evidence in court." I handed the microphone back to the event organizer and walked off the stage, my head held high. Behind me, I could hear Ryan finally finding his voice, trying to explain, to deny, to shift blame. But it was too late. The video of my speech went viral within hours. Chloe's live stream had captured everything, including her own horrified reactions and the murmurs of the crowd. By morning, it had been shared millions of times, picked up by news outlets, and spawned countless discussions about domestic abuse and financial fraud. Ryan was arrested 2 days later. The investigation into his practice revealed that he had stolen over $2 million from client accounts. The audio recording I had obtained was deemed admissible in court, despite how it had been acquired. Chloe faced lesser charges, but her influencer career was destroyed overnight. Brands dropped her sponsorships, her follower count plummeted, and she became an internet meme representing fake sympathy and calculated cruelty. 6 months later, I was sitting in a small coffee shop in Carmel by the Sea, California, watching the ocean through floor-to-ceiling windows. I had used the life insurance payout, which I was legally entitled to since Ryan's fraud had voided his claims, to start over completely. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Verdict is in. Ryan got 15 years for fraud and conspiracy. Chloe got 2 years probation and community service. Thought you'd want to know." I smiled and put the phone away. Justice felt good, but it wasn't what had healed me. What had healed me was discovering that I was stronger than I had ever imagined, that I could survive betrayal and transform it into power. I opened my laptop and looked at the website I was building for my new graphic design business. The logo I had created featured a phoenix rising from flames, wings spread wide against a golden sky. The tagline read, "From ashes, we rise." Because that's what I had learned through all of this. That sometimes the people who try to destroy you actually free you. They strip away everything you thought you knew about yourself and your life, and in doing so, they reveal who you really are underneath. I wasn't the weak, desperate woman who had clung to a marriage that was slowly poisoning her. I wasn't the victim who had believed that love meant accepting less than she deserved. I was someone who could face the truth, no matter how painful, and transform it into something beautiful. The baby I had lost would always be a part of my story, but that loss had also led me to discover a strength I never knew I possessed. In trying to silence me, Ryan and Chloe had instead given me the loudest voice I had ever had. I closed the laptop and walked outside to the beach, feeling the salt air on my face and the solid ground beneath my feet. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new chances to build the life I actually wanted rather than the one I thought I was supposed to want. But tonight, I was exactly where I needed to be. Free, strong, and finally, truly alive.